So then we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yeshayahu established then the times and seasons regarding the restoration period, and we find then the first holy city on the land of Cush as precisely as Prophet Yeshayahu has mentioned and prophesied. As it was then explained a few situations in the previous video, we understand the importance of the first and the second sons then regarding Ezekiel the 37th chapter and the restoration of the first stick and the second stick of authority. We understand as the sons of trade being the sons of Ishmael, and then the son of tabernacling came through Yitzhak, or then the son of Ibrahim and Sarah much later. As it was important for us to establish then a very clear understanding, the first son was then from Ibrahim and Hagar, from Egypt. And then Ibrahim taught the great deals and the great work of being a trader, the importance of being a person related with trade. Much later, when then the first son of Ibrahim, Ishmael, was then grown up, very much loved, he received then his inheritance, and then he started his own trading company. Later on, when Ibrahim then and Sarah, they went on their pilgrimage. Then short while after, then Sarah had her son, or the second son, or then Yitzhak. Then started the whole pilgrimage, or then the loving mother was then bestowing her love upon her second son, thus then starting the sons of Yitzhak. Both of them are extremely important, because the first complements the second and vice versa. What can we understand as far as life? We understand that work and religion are hand to hand. From these couple of situations, a person makes a being. A person is a being. A person is then living. What they do and what they believe. So what they do is the sons of Ishmael, and what they believe, then the sons of Yitzhak. That's how they should complement each other, as the first and the second sons. We then, Gentiles, are learning from these, and then as the prophecies are very clear, it takes some time for us to study these instructions and understand the times and the seasons, so then we can enjoy being part of this very elite group. But then we understand there are other situations going on as far as we can understand, related with merchants and the merchants of the earth. We understand there are many kinds of relationships on the 11th chapter of Daniel. There is then the kingdom of the north, the kingdom of the east, the kingdom of the south. We understand the Soviet Union is returning mightily and strongly, and must become greater than the first, and absolutely power of military might that we can ever imagine. Obviously, because there is a protection of trade and protection of then not only the Chinese ships, but the friends of China then being protected by the Soviet Union also. We understand submarine warfare is extremely important, so then we can understand this chapter and understand the relationships amongst these players of the 11th chapter. Knowingly, we are then the base of the statue, where iron does not mix with the clay. As we understand iron, on the base of the statue you find then the Soviet Union, China, and then Africa. These are then the iron. The rest of the world are very much clay, because it is what they believe. What they believe is not strong. It's what makes them weak. As we can understand this factor, earlier For instance, before 2009, where then the time of the 1,000 years of deceit was then yet active, we understand there were nations very strong. But we must understand from the Enlightenment when the instructions are on. We are during the time of the Restoration period, and when we observe back what went on during the time of the 1,000 years, it was truly a failure. Not much we could gather from those times. As far as the enlightenment of the Holy Instructions, we can't glean from these factors very much. There were great times of discovery, great times of knowledge increasing in many areas, but understanding the Holy Instructions, you don't get much learning from the period of time of 1,000 years, where then Daniel mentioned regarding roaming. And for a time his people would roam simply means the 1,000 years of deceit. But at the end of it, you should have then a peak of knowledge regarding trade, and then we would shift from the time of deceit and time of precision, time of devil to time of dragon. So then, as we read the Holy Instructions, we are then delighted, and we are then involved from the 5th verse through the 7th verse, and we should read these important 1st, 2nd, and 3rd verses very completely, because it gives us a very important insights on what's going to take place then with the relationship of the kingdom of the north mostly. After the 7th verse then gives you the importance of understanding the Soviet Union solely, until you find 7th verses later already giving you an indication of much equipment, then restructuring the world and what the world believes for the time of the autumn feast. So from the 7th until 7th verses later, you find mostly regarding then the relationship with the kingdom of the north. There is the information regarding the kingdom of the south, but then the kingdom of the north, then as you read the events, is above. It is absolutely taking the leading on these few verses. Later on then continues, that we shouldn't go very far ahead, but wait for the proper time. As we understand, we are expecting then Mr. Putin of the Soviet Union taking more leadership and being more bold, because the Holy Instructions is giving us a very important detail regarding then whatsoever he places on his agenda, he will be prosperous. And there is a reason for it, because there is a shift of a military power from the United States to the Soviet Union, and many people, they don't believe these. However, when you read the instruction, it is extremely clear. So then, these truly gives us a lot of studies, so then we can prepare ourselves for the events. So then when we read this information, the same time comes to our minds the machine of Ezekiel, the 1st chapter. These events taking place at the same time and synchronizing in circles, so then we can understand later on in preparing ourselves for the time of the end. Similarly, we should be then involved with Revelation. As we read, as we prepare ourselves for the autumn feast, then certain sections you find yourself studying then chapter 1:8 of Revelation, for instance, speaks of the sons of Yitzhak and tabernacling, when the system is already implemented. The 8th chapter is already when there is the time of the autumn feast. So Revelation, we should not read chapter by chapter, verse by verse. We should read sections of it. Chapter 1:8, for instance, is before chapter 8. Chapter 1:8 simply explains then tabernacling not to be involved only with the system of the world, but explains then, reminding themselves of the restoration period of the holy tabernaclings. So then, as we read these, there are studies there for many days and many months, and we expected them later. I had received via internet more information from the Soviet Union, because as we can understand from the 7th verse through until 7 verses later, it's only primarily the leadership of the Soviet Union, and whatsoever they place on their agenda there is decent as per what they wish for regarding the new system of China. They will be prosperous. So then let's wait for the news. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.